Good afternoon. Good evening. It is evening time on the East Coast or on the West Coast. Greetings. I am Qwanquita Wright, CEO of Focusing on Self. Self stands for security, empowerment, love, and fulfillment. And today I am elated to join Grace for this community all the way from the other side of the world here in South Korea, where it is 2 a.m. Uh, Tag someone in, share, let them know, join in today. Today, we are talking about doing the work, but doing the work around relationships. So, we're talking about the title of this is Ships and Trips. So, basically, this journey that relationships takes us on. So, again, don't forget, like, share, and get someone to join in because we're talking about all the things about relationships. You know, that topic that we oftentimes avoid. So join us in, tag in a friend, and come on as we get ready to talk about relationships.
It's your girl, Kenitra Moselle, and I am so excited. We just finished up the book and brunch to launch my first book, Grace for This, the devotional. It's a 21-day journey for women who are growing through grief. The conversations that we had in here today was phenomenal. I want to let you know that GRACE is the acronym. It stands for Grief, Rest, Aid, Community, and Evolve. The reality of it is that we are experiencing a grief journey every single day. Every transition can cause you to grief, but are you leaning into your grief? Grieving is also exhausting, so I'm going to encourage you to actually rest. And when you're resting, rest is clarifying. You're going to learn what you do and don't have capacity for anymore. And guess what? You're going to begin to ask with more clarity about exactly what you need. That C stands for community, because when you start asking for help, your people who are meant for this next season are going to respond to your ask, and your community is going to change. And then lastly, when you go through that grace journey, you're going to evolve to the next best version of yourself. So I'm so excited for you to be a part of this journey. You're going to love what we're doing in this community. Follow Kenitra Moselle and follow Grace for This on Instagram and Facebook.
Hello again. Hopefully, you had the opportunity to share the link, get one of your friends to kind of join in as we talk about relationships. So, I'm going to be multitasking here because I also want to be able to interact with everyone that is on Facebook as well as everyone that is on YouTube. So, again, I am Qwanquita Wright, CEO of Focusing on Self, which stands for Security, Empowerment, Love, and Fulfillment. I am by education, academic background, I am a licensed clinical social worker. I am also a life and wellness coach. In this setting, we do a lot of teaching skills, teaching strategies. This is not an alternative to therapy, but is also in addition to seeking therapy or life coaching. So let's get into it. Let's talk relationships. If we're honest, there's a lot on the internet about relationships. There's a lot of books out there. There's a lot of podcasts. There's good, bad, and indifferent things about relationships that we learn. Some of the things that we learn about relationships are extremely helpful, right, for us and help us to navigate relationships in a positive way. Some of the things that we learned about relationships have essentially taken us on this journey of really having to learn different strategies to navigating relationships. So we're really going to have a very honest, open, transparent conversation about relationships. So a few weeks ago, January, actually, at the end of January, myself and one of my co-hosts here hosted a event called Wholeness Unlocked. And one of the panels that we actually had was on navigating relationships, personal and professional. And I will tell you, the way that we set up the panel was that it was going to be two It was going to be 2 females and 1 male on each panel. The relationship panel was the hardest panel to find a male for. We probably, I would say, invited 3-4 different males to be on the relationship panel. Many of who have been married 10 plus years, served in their career for several years. And they were all like, oh, I don't know about being on a panel about relationships. And I'm like, well, it's not about being perfect in a relationship. It's about our ability to communicate. How are we navigating relationships, even when there's barriers and even when there's challenges? And so what I found out is that people are sometimes very uncomfortable around the topic of relationships. And I don't know if that's because there's too many voices that we listen to when it comes to relationships. There's not honest dialogue around relationships, but whatever the case may be, relationships are something that we're all going to have in life, right? We're going to be unable to navigate life without relationships. And so today we're going to talk about 3 primary relationships. Now, over the course of these Wellness Wednesdays, we'll be breaking each one of these 3 relationships down a little bit more and more. So I have handwritten my notes. So grab yourself a pen and a notebook, because we're really going to dig into relationships. First of all, we're going to define, like, what is a relationship? Drop your comments. Like, what do you think a relationship is? Right? What did you learn a relationship was to be for your life? Right? What is a relationship? So when I start defining things, I like to always start with the biblical definition of the word. So relationships. A relationship is a covenant, a commitment, a loving and obedient connection, an equally yoked connection. A relationship is personal. It is intimate. It reflects Christ's love. That is what a relationship is. A relationship is also accountability. It is our accountability partner, whether that's you are in a personal relationship or you have professional relationships. There are accountability that comes along with those relationships as well. And then a relationship is also sacrificial. There are sacrifices that are made in relationships. So what are the 3 relationships that we're actually going to talk about? The first relationship is the relationship that we have with God. That's our first relationship that we're going to talk about. Our second relationship that we're going to talk about is our relationship with ourselves. Our relationship with ourselves. And the third relationship that we're going to talk about is our relationship with community, whether that's family, friends, colleagues, whomever it may be. That is our community, the people that we are connected to. So let's dissect our relationship with God. If you can, drop in the comments and one word that would describe your current relationship with God. What is one word that you would use to describe that relationship? Feel free, drop those in the comments. So when we look at our relationship with God, right, or God's relationship with us, the one verse that always comes to mind for me is John 3:16. And I'm going to read this because for God so loved the world that he gave his only, right? His one and only son, that whosoever believes in him shall not perish, but have eternal life. Let's think about that. God in relationship with us, to be in relationship with us, he gave his only son so that we may have access to him through his son, Jesus Christ. Imagine, for those of you who are parents, that you have to give, right, your only son or your only daughter so that other people could have access to you through them. That's the first relationship. It is sacrificial. It is loving. It is a covenant. It is a commitment. And John 3:16 describes that best, that God will give his only son, his one and only son. What a sacrifice that is made in a relationship. So again, relationships they require various sacrifices of us. And sometimes that is very difficult to make sacrifices in a relationship if we're going to be completely transparent. There are certain things that we are willing to sacrifice, and then there's other things that we are sometimes unwilling to sacrifice. So thinking about your relationship with God, what is God calling you to sacrifice in that relationship? Because every relationship requires a different sacrifice with us. So just imagine, right? Write it down. What is God requiring you to sacrifice to be in a true relationship with him? And I saw some comments there that people are like describing their relationship with God, or obedience, right? Obedient, developing, rhythm, amazing. So what does he require you to sacrifice to be obedient? What does he require you to sacrifice to continue to develop and refine that relationship? What does he require you to maintain the rhythm of that relationship? What is required? What is the commitment that you must have to the relationship that you have through Christ Jesus to the Father? There's going to be things that we have to sacrifice. Sometimes it's our time. Sometimes it's a change in our behavior. But then there's going to be a sacrifice in that relationship. If we were to look at, I actually looked up the same verse, John 3:16, in about 22 other different versions. And the one thing that is consistent in all versions is it say, he gave his only. So I say that to mean that sometimes you may have to give your only of something to be in relationship, especially the relationship with the Father. When we think about relationships, not only the one that we have with God, but the one we have with ourselves and the one that we have with community, is that the love that is shown is unconditional. I think that's also a challenge in relationships, is that we have based our love on conditions, right? And I am definitely guilty of having based my love on conditions, is that because you do this for me, then I do this for you. Yes, love is reciprocal in all of the ways, but we have defined love, sometimes relationships, under very strict conditions. If we look at the relationship, right, of God giving his one and only son, we don't see the same conditions that we put under our relationship. They're very, very different than we put on the relationship we have with ourselves, in the relationship that we have with community. So now we have to ask ourselves, where did we learn about how to navigate relationships? Did we learn that by having a relationship with God, or did we learn that from relationships that caused us trauma? Did we learn that by not having healthy attachment styles in childhood? Did we learn that because we felt we poured into someone or we poured into something and it was not rewarding or beneficial for us? Are we learning how to navigate relationships from society versus from the word of God? Because a lot of times, and I will say this, that we're reading so many different books on relationships, right? So we're reading this person's book on relationship, and then we're reading someone else's book on relationship, and we're trying to combine those things and develop strategy skills about how to navigate relationships. But what happens is sometimes those voices are so loud and dominating in our lives, right? And have created all of this these barriers for us that we're not navigating these relationships in a healthy way, and therefore it's taking us down this different journey. That's why we talk about all the different trips that relationships will take you on, because just like healthy relationships will take you on this journey where you're growing, you're maturing, you're held accountable, you're being challenged to grow, to become a better version of yourselves. There's also a journey, right? Trips that unhealthy relationships take us on. And usually those unhealthy relationships take us on a journey of one, right? Disobedience, right? Take us on the trips of really not loving ourselves, moving further and further away from God, feeling very ostracized, rejected, betrayed, abandoned, all of those things. And what typically happens is those are the things that we hold on to the most. We hold on to the relationships sometimes that caused us a lot of trauma, a lot of stress, anxiety, depression. Those are the relationships that we sometimes use to define how we now want to navigate relationships. And sometimes that causes us to not navigate them in a healthy way, because we now allow the past to become our present. And I'll even speak for myself that I've sometimes navigated present relationships based on past experiences. Is that I form these narratives in my head to say, well, all relationships are this way. Or I've put up these different barriers because in my mind, like, I want to protect myself. Yes, the word tells us to guard our heart. But what happens is, right, we put up all of these barriers, right, to protect ourselves, not because we have seen something in the person that has, what God has said, has given us discernment and say, hey, like, navigate that relationship differently. No, we are making those decisions sometimes from a place of trauma, of hurt, abandonment, or betrayal. And those things not only impact our relationship with ourselves and community, it also impacts our relationship with God. Because then sometimes we try to navigate our relationship, our spiritual relationship, in the same way that we navigate our other relationships. And they are not the same. They are not the same. But if we're honest, if I learn to navigate my relationship with God, right, being vulnerable, being honest, being transparent, sharing my thoughts, my feelings, going to Him for guidance, hearing Him, listening, being still, then I'll learn to navigate the other two relationships very differently. Or some of us do extremely well at navigating our relationship, our spiritual relationship, our relationship with God, but it's our relationship with ourselves that we don't do well in navigating. Think about it. When was the last time you told yourself how much you loved you? When was the last time that you said, you know what? I really do love myself. And because I love myself, I would like to treat myself better. Right? I would like to take care of my health because I love myself. Right? Just think about it. When was the last time you say that you love yourself? Just recently, I went to an event that some of my colleagues here hosted. And one of the things that they actually had us do, and I'm looking at it right now on my desk, is they had us write a letter to ourselves about, just write a letter to yourself about what you love about yourself. This is my letter. And they had us put a sticker on it, and they said, read this whenever you're feeling down, or you're finding it difficult to love yourself. And then they asked if anybody would want to read the letter out loud. Now, I'm comfortable in a lot of settings, doing quite a few things, or I can become comfortable. But this activity, honestly, I was uncomfortable with. Not because I don't love myself, but I was unpacking at the same time who I had become. Like, I'm like, okay, well, what is it that I now love about myself? Because sometimes, even when we're journaling or we're processing things or we're talking about ourselves, we talk about all the things that we are not. And there's sometimes a guilt or shame attached to talking about who we are. And so I really was struggling with writing a letter to myself about what I loved about myself and why I love those things about myself. And what I said in the letter to myself is I said that I love that I was able to overcome things, move through barriers, navigate life, get on the other side of it. And how that showed me this level of strength and resiliency that I had. But what I loved most about myself is that I had given God a yes. And I had meant that yes. I see Cassie says that she sends a letter to herself weekly. Oh, I really like that idea. She goes to the post office and mails herself cards and wow, I really like that idea of writing a letter to yourself weekly. Because a lot of times what happens is we will give encouraging words and love to everyone else, but we would not give the same to ourselves, as we see ourselves as unworthy of those things. But think about how worthy God saw us, that he would sacrifice his one and only son so that his other children could have access to him. Think about how much love that really is. That love cannot be defined. It's like hard to sum up how much love that really is. It's hard to conceptualize that. That is truly unconditional love. When was the last time you loved yourself without conditions? When was the last time? Think about it. Because sometimes we say, I love myself when I lose a certain amount of weight. I love myself when I get to this point financially. I love myself when I finish school. I'll love myself when I get married. I'll love myself after the kids graduate, right? I'll love myself when. I love myself when. But what we're finding is that we keep moving that, right, to something else. We keep moving it. Okay, well, I was going to love myself when I lost 20 pounds. Okay, I lost the 20 pounds. You know what? Now I'm going to love myself when I lose 30 pounds. Oh, I lost the 30 pounds. Oh, you know what? I'll love myself more when I lose 40 pounds, when I can wear this dress I bought 10 years ago. And so we keep moving it and we keep moving it. That's conditional. We've given ourselves certain conditions of when we're going to love ourselves. And we also do that with people. Think about it. For those of us who have had some maybe unhealthy relationships, they didn't go as planned, right? The intentions were not met, whatever the circumstances were, is that now we enter into a new relationship, whether that's with a friend, a colleague, right? Whoever, a significant other, whoever that may be. And we look for them to meet certain conditions before we extend them love. But love is unconditional, right? It's unconditional love. And with the unconditional love comes unconditional grace. And I don't know about you, but I need both of those. I need unconditional love and I need unconditional grace. I need it in my relationship with God. I need it in my relationship with myself. And I need it in my relationship with my community. Unconditional love and unconditional grace. When was the last time you gave yourself unconditional grace? A level of forgiving, a level of forgiveness despite what you had done. Not holding, yes, holding yourself accountable, but not holding yourself, not trapping yourself in your present because of your past. And we tend to do that. And again, I rest assured, right? Just like this is for you, this is definitely for me. God is definitely speaking to me also, because I have done that with people. I have done that with myself. I have sometimes even done that in my relationship with God. Is that I've determined how much I'll love him and how I'll serve him and how much I'll be obedient based on when these conditions are met in my life. But that is not how relationships work. But again, there's so many voices that tell us how relationships work or why they don't work. Or sometimes there's no voice. Right? There's no conversation around relationships. Sometimes we're just out here trying to figure it out. And then we sometimes see people trying to figure it out. And we've kind of navigated relationships more, maybe in a more healthier way than they have, but we don't share. Or we're not honest. We paint a false picture of relationships. Right? We basically filter our relationships. Everything, all of them have a filter on them. We gloss them up, we make them shine. And so the world from the outside looking in, even those who are closest to us, who we trust, we've made it look that way to them. I am not telling you to overshare. I am telling you that sometimes in our circles, we need to share. We need to share about how to navigate relationships. Because if we as the kingdom, as people of the kingdom, don't teach people about relationships, then the world will. And we see the danger of the world teaching us how to navigate relationships. How do we see it? We've bought the books, we've listened to the podcasts, we've listened to the YouTubes, and we've tried to apply some of those things in our lives, and we found that sometimes they have been detrimental to us. They have caused us more harm and more hurt. So it is our responsibility, right, as people of God that belong to kingdom people, the church, to share, to teach about relationships. Not just the relationship that we have with God, but the relationship that we need to have with ourselves, the relationship that we need to have with community. So again, relationships are about unconditional love and grace. The one we have with God, the one we have with ourselves, and the one we have with community. It is also about relational boundaries. We hear the word boundaries thrown around a lot, right? Like, hey, I'm protecting my boundaries. I'm protecting my peace. These are my boundaries. But really, what is a boundary? Think about it. What is a boundary, especially around relationships? I said that I wanted to look at where God gave us a relational boundary in the word, where he laid it out like, this is my boundary. And I actually wrote it down. And I wrote it down, Exodus 20:3. You shall have no other gods before me. God laid out his relational boundary. We are going to be in relationship. I am your God, and you will have no other gods before me. That's his relational boundary. That was a boundary that he gave to us. That's it. You will have no other God before me. That is a very strong, defined relational boundary. It says to be in relationship with you, I will be number one. You want to be in a relationship with me? I will be number one. No one, nothing will come before me. I was like, oh, and I had never looked at Exodus 20:3 as a relational boundary. I've never looked at it that way. I just looked at it like, okay, I will have no other gods before you. Now, if we're honest, think about how many times we violated that boundary. How many times have we not honored that boundary? How many times have we had our careers before God, our family before God, things before God, ourselves, our own agendas before God? We have violated, we have not honored that boundary. But yet, even though we have not always honored that boundary, he still shows us unconditional love and unconditional grace. So I share that to say that sometimes the ones that we love are going to, even unintentionally, not honor our boundary, our relational boundary. Then we must decide, how do I now navigate that relationship when my boundary, right, was not respected, it was not honored? Sometimes we violate our own boundary. For example, we could have a relational boundary with ourselves. We could say that, you know what? My relational boundary, in the relationship that I am in with myself, I am committed to putting these things in place to ensure that I maintain a healthy relationship with myself. That I will have quiet time, stillness, where maybe I'm journaling, maybe I work out, different things like that. Right. And so because I have a healthy relationship with myself, I will put that in place to make sure I take care of myself. And then ask yourself, how many times you have not honored your own boundaries? How many times have you not respected your own boundary? So a boundary, right? We have here defined in so many different ways. And so a boundary could be actually things that we value, right? That we want other people to respect and value in our lives. It could be a realistic expectation that we have. It's like, hey, if we're friends, then my expectation would be that sometimes you show up to things that I have, right? You show up when I need you. We have honest conversation. Right? We have honest dialogue, that we are not offensive to each other. But again, sometimes we violate those boundaries. That I say, you know what? I don't want people to offend me or judge me or talk down to me. And then I do the very thing to myself and to other people. And I will tell you that I am accountable for those things because I have done that. And I have damaged relationships because I have done that. Now, what I would ask the person is that they would show me unconditional love and unconditional grace. But I also have to ask myself, have I shown people who have done similar things to me unconditional love and unconditional grace? That doesn't always mean reconciliation. Sometimes when people hear that, they think that means go back, repair, reconciliation. No, that's a dialogue between you and God. But we can still have the responsibility of showing unconditional love and unconditional grace, even when we violated, dishonored the relational boundaries that were in place in our relationship with God, in our relationship with ourselves, and in our relationships with community. Those things are still important. And I wrote down here, I need to look at my notes. I wrote down here, imagine if God didn't have any boundaries in place, imagine how you'll function in that relationship with him if he had no boundaries in place. There's a reason why boundaries are important and boundaries are in place. For many of us, right, unintentionally, if there were not boundaries in place, we would essentially just kind of do whatever we want, right? With a lack of accountability, right? With a lack of repenting, because there were no boundaries in place. So boundaries hold us accountable. And I agree, Teresa. We definitely have to learn to show up for ourselves before we can expect others to show up for us. And I think that's a conversation that we also don't have enough. We can tend to think that showing up for ourselves is selfish, because sometimes we learn to take care of everyone else but ourselves. And I will speak for myself that I have done that several different times in my life, that I have learned to take care of everyone else. Then I'll get to myself when I get to myself. And sometimes that's also how we navigate our relationship with God, is that we'll take care of everything else, everyone else. And then we remember, you know what, I ain't spend no time with God today. I should at least maybe throw like 10 minutes in here. And then we give him 10 minutes where we're tired, we're exhausted, all of those things. And then we do the same thing with ourselves a lot of times, is that we've shown up for everyone else all day. We've been pulled, tugged on all day. And then we come home and we're exhausted. And we think about like, oh man, I did say that I was going to commit to having a better relationship with myself. And I was going to do that one way by like maybe working out. And so I'd be like, oh, then we started being like, okay, well, maybe I'll go walk for 10 minutes. And not saying that's not helpful, but I'm saying you did not honor your own boundary that was in place. And so we're expecting other people to do things in our lives that we're unwilling to do for ourselves. So I want you to challenge yourself to, one, respect your own boundary. Honor, commit to your own boundary. Show up for yourself. Learn what it's like to actually show up for yourself. Learn what it's like to actually be kind to yourself. If you're looking at my earrings, there, God is kind. That's Joy Pittman. So it's a great earrings. Get your pair. So learn to show up for yourself, to love yourself, to be present in your own life. Learn how that's important. Learn how to show up in your community as a person who is healing, a person who is growing, a person who is maturing, a person who is sharing, a person who can love their community, even if the community doesn't look like them, doesn't talk like them, doesn't have as much as them. You can still connect and you can still love that community. You can still show that community unconditional love, unconditional grace. And I think that's why a lot of times our communities are not healthy. It's because we do not show unconditional love and unconditional grace. We have defined that sometimes based on if you look like me, if you talk like me, if you think like me, if you are me, basically, then I will extend that to you as a person in my community. But the charge is to extend that in spite of. So we're learning unconditional love and grace. We're learning relational boundaries. And then we're learning how to manage toxic influence. Think about something in your life that you know, or someone that you know in your life that you are connected to that is unhealthy for you. But you're having a challenge breaking that attachment. You know it's not good for you. But yet, it's difficult to break free from whatever that thing is. Managing toxic influence require us to actually process and become aware of who has our ear. Who has our ear? Who has our heart? What has our heart? Who has our heart? And why does that thing or that someone have your heart? Think about how much, if you've ever broken free from toxic influence, think about how freeing that felt to you. Think about the position that breaking free from that put you in to now be obedient in your relationship with God, to now honor the boundary in place of having no other God before Him. Sometimes the very thing that we are idolizing is the thing, right? So we're idolizing something that is extremely toxic for us. Whether it's like we are unintentionally idolizing a relationship because we think to ourselves, where I've put all of these years into this, and so I want to make it work, when God has been clear to you that you need to break free from that relationship, that relationship is keeping you in bondage. So whatever that's, a relationship with a person, relationships with things, a relationship to a certain career that God's telling you to leave, whatever that may be, He's saying to you to break free from it. But you're staying connected because you're scared, because you're fearful of what's on the other side. So sometimes we stay connected to what is toxic because we can't even imagine what is on the other side of it. And so all that our brain, our body knows is like chaos and dysfunction. And so we learn to function in relationship to chaos and dysfunction. And we all would like to say that we would never do that. But the reality is, we're all capable of doing it or have done it before. So, this is why community is important, because in community, we have the opportunity to share our story, right? To be a testimony to someone else who may be going through the same thing, that they can get on the other side of it. When we talk toxic influence, and I will tell you this kind of like even for myself, when we talk toxic influence, sometimes we'll like to think it's the other person, but sometimes we're the toxic influence. Sometimes it's us. Sometimes it's not the other person. Imagine having to acknowledge and having to actually admit, right? And repent for being the toxic influence in a relationship. That requires a total surrender in your relationship with God, so then that you can acknowledge those things. And it is because you want to grow and mature, right? And again, there's like conviction that comes when we're really building our relationship with God, right? We learn there's different, because we are building that relationship, we start to see ourselves very different. And so we may have thought that it was everyone else. Because I know I've been there before, is that I thought it was everyone else. Like it's everyone else, it's this person, it's that person, they don't do this, they don't do that. But then I learned that sometimes that person was actually me. I was the toxic influence. I was the one who did not honor relational boundaries. I was the one that did not show unconditional love and unconditional grace. It was me. It wasn't anyone else, it was me. But I could not see it. And I probably could not hear when people told me that because, right, my vision was blurred by society's definition of how to have a healthy relationship, of what a relationship is. It was blurred by things of the past, right? So relational trauma. It was blurred by unforgiveness. It was blurred by thoughts of inadequacy, unworthiness, right? Lack of confidence. And so I could not see it because things were in my way and blocking my view. But once I developed that relationship with God and understood like how I needed, right, to work on that relationship before I worked on any other relationship, working on that relationship changed my view of things. It moved things out of the way that was blocking my eyesight. So then I could see myself clear. There was clarity that came from that. There was no longer an obstructed view. I could see it. Sometimes we have to acknowledge that we may be toxic, even if it's unintentional. That's where we have to be willing to go back and apologize. And sometimes apologizing is extremely difficult. But it's like, do I apologize or do I keep living in the chaos and dysfunction that comes from my toxic behavior? And that disrupts, right, my relationship with God and disrupts my relationship with myself and disrupts my relationship with community. Because we're in a position to make a choice. The choice is what changes the journey. Think about what or who influences you the most. Is it the things of the living word or is it the things of the world? What influences you most? What gets most of your time? What has most of your heart? Because those things will drive how we navigate relationships. And we will know when we are in toxic situations or are being influenced by toxic things. And we will know that by the fruit. That's how we'll know. If a relationship is toxic, then the fruit of that relationship will look different than the fruit of a relationship that is healthy. And sometimes we can confuse being challenged in a healthy relationship. Sometimes we're being challenged in a healthy relationship. I know I have been. I've been challenged extremely in my healthy relationships. And sometimes we look at that as a red flag. But really, it's not. It's just that we're so accustomed to things being so toxic and people excusing our behaviors that we don't know now when we're being challenged by something that is healthy and that is calling forth a different version of us. Not everything is a red flag. But I think that's what society teaches us about relationships is that so many things are red flags. Look for the red flags, look for the red flags, look for the red flags. You're going to have discernment because you're spending time with God. That's how you're going to have discernment. That's how you're going to pick up on those things. Because sometimes we're identifying something as a red flag when really it's our trauma. It's the things that we haven't healed from. And we're seeing it as a red flag in a relationship with someone else. But really, all that we're seeing is our trauma show up, our unresolved trauma, our unresolved grief, the wellness work that we have not done showing up. And we have to be able to discern the difference between those things. And we're oftentimes not going to be able to do that if the word takes up more space in our life than the word. We're not going to be able to do that. So that's the importance of us really continuously developing our relationship with God. That's the importance of it. It will help us to navigate the other two relationships. Think about when you did not love God in the same way that you love him now. Think about what your relationship looked like with yourself. What your relationship looked like with community. It was really different. It was really different. It was really different. So what are some what are some barriers that gets in the way of our relationships? And then what are some strategies to really navigating relationships differently? Some of the barriers that actually get in the way of our relationship actually is our attachment styles. And we're going to talk in depth about those when it comes to relationship. Our attachment styles. How do we form attachment to other people? Some of us are very anxious about relationships. So there's a lot of fear around developing relationships because we fear that the same thing is going to happen that's happened to us before. Then some of us are very avoidant of relationships. Is that we'll say things like, we don't want to make new friends. I have enough friends, right? And I used to be that person. Oh, I have enough friends, right? I don't need to meet anybody else new. And I'm not saying that you need to develop an intimate friendship with everyone, but we can learn to have professional relationships, healthy acquaintances. We can practice having those in our lives. So imagine if you are avoidant of relationships and God sends a person in your life, right, that is going to connect you to a person to fulfill a promise or a purpose that he has for you. But because you're so avoidant of relationships, when that person comes, you miss that connection. Or you have so much fear surrounding relationships. God sends you that person and he says, I need you to connect with that person. But because you're fearful and you're paying more attention to your past than what God wants to do in your life presently and in the future, you miss the connection. It takes work to learn to have a healthy, right, a secure attachment style. It takes work. It takes work to do that. And we cannot do the work solo. We can't do it in a silo. Like, we need God to help us in a relationship, and we need community to help us do relationship. We need both. We need all of it. A third barrier to navigating relationships sometimes is time. And what do I mean by time is a barrier to navigating relationships? Sometimes we just don't make time. We have every reason why we don't have time. Why we don't have time to spend with God, why we don't have time to do things that are for ourselves, whether that's, getting healthy, eating clean, right? Taking care of the body. We have, we're like, oh, well, I'm working all day. I'm doing, yes, right? But if we were to actually map out our day, I promise you, some of our day we'll see that we're kind of spending aimlessly strolling on social media. I know I've noticed that we're spending just strolling, right? Trying to have a way to reduce the stress that's in our lives. Imagine if you replace 30 minutes of your social media time with a 30-minute walk every day. Do it. Do it for 21 days and let me know how it goes. Walk 30 minutes instead of strolling on social media those 30 minutes. There will be a lot of changes, not probably only physically, but emotionally. Right? The regulation of your emotions will change, right? Behaviorally, it will change. You may even find there's a change in your focus. Because exercise, I like to call exercise the most underutilized medication that we have access to. Exercise. So, what are 3 strategies to also helping us navigate these relationships, right? Because we know what some barriers are, but what are some actual strategies and things that we can actually put into place to help us navigate those relationships? The first thing that's going to be, it was also the thing that was a barrier. Time. Time. Time is important. We hear people talk about it all the time. Like I think it was his name, Gary Chapman, I think, wrote a book called The 5 Love Languages. And one of the things in there is like quality time. Quality time is important because it allows us to get to know someone. So time. Spending time with God helps us get to know God, but also helps us get to know ourselves. It also allows us to get to know the community, to understand people differently, so then that we can then show unconditional love and grace because we understand, right? We understand our relationship with God, and we understand our relationships with ourselves, and then we understand community. And then, secondly, what else is something that can help us navigate relationships, right? What else is a strategy to navigating relationships? Something else that is a strategy to navigating relationships. So we have time, right? And what else do we have for navigating relationships? It's going to be forgiveness. A strategy to navigating relationships is also going to be forgiveness. Being able to forgive and being able to forgive quickly. That I know there are some things in our life that takes time when it comes to forgiveness. It's going to take time. But we don't want to carry unforgiveness in our body too long that now it produces it produces trauma responses, a lot of physiological responses, a lot of medical stuff, because we're carrying the weights of unforgiveness in our body. So we have time and we have forgiveness. And then thirdly, we have love. Love. There is no one in this world that is not entitled to love. And when we're in love, we're kind. And when we're in love, we're patient. We're all of those things because we love. So as we learn to navigate relationships and understand the journey of relationships, I want to encourage you to consider who you are in each one of those relationships and how you can show up as a different, healed, or healing, mature version of yourself in those relationships. Thank you for your time and joining in today. Remember to share, right? Remember to show up in your relationship with God, yourself, in community, showing unconditional love and grace, right? Respecting, honoring relational boundaries, and also managing toxic influence. Thank you and have a phenomenal day. Check back in about replacing some of your strolling with 30 minutes of exercise and let me know how it goes. All right, I will turn it back over to our hostess behind scenes. Thank you. Make sure you like, make sure you share, and also go back, replay, take notes, check in, let us know. How's it going? Thank you for joining in. Thank you so much. I love you all. I love you big. I love you tremendously. And let's continue to grow, to heal, to mature. And remember to stay focusing on self, security, empowerment, love, and fulfillment. Thank you so much. Have a blessed day.
Hello, my name is Kenitra Moselle, and I am founder of a beautiful community called Grace for This. We are about women taking ownership of their wellness journey in 3 ways: personally, relationally, and professionally. I'm inviting you to be honest about your grieving experience, your healing experience, and then lastly, your building experience. You're going through this because you're graced for this.